Hello, everybody, and welcome to On the Road to DevHops. I'm Bannon, and I'm here with my compadre, Bryan Finster, and we have a special guest with us tonight. Bryan.
Yeah, and I'm Bryan Finster. I kind of enjoy talking to people occasionally. I'm a value stream architect who rages at dumb a lot. But here we have with us a good friend of mine, Courtney Kissler. Deeply honored to have you join us, Courtney. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. So Courtney Kissler, I am the CTO at Zulily, longtime retail technology leader, and have been, connected to Bryan since 2015, and through the DevOps enterprise community, and so we've had kind of a long-standing sharing of the good and the bad that comes with DevOps transformation.
Yeah, don't leave me out. You and I did have a brief affair in 2018.
That is true.
It was brief.
Yeah.
It was brief. It was almost like a one-night stand.
But it did happen.
It did happen. It did happen. We met on a panel, and really it was about DevOps and about changing the landscape. So it's really good to have you on here tonight. So I got to ask, gang, what are you drinking?
Courtney, you go first. What are you drinking?
Okay, so I am having a non-alcoholic. It's called Athletic Light.
Okay.
I have been on what I like to call a hashtag booze break for over a year.
Nice.
And so this is one of my absolute favorite non-alcoholic beers.
So you can keep us on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
You'll be the designated driver for this conversation. And so because of the topic we're having tonight, I'm having a really nice straight Kentucky bourbon, but it's a high proof. It's a 103. So
So you'll be slurring about halfway through?
Could be.
Could be. Well, I will share with you that Bryan knows that I like a gimlet, but it's my own recipe for a gimlet. And it's, I throttle back, same thing. I've got a splash of gin, some sparkly water, and my lime. I don't use simple syrup. And I will not be slurring halfway through. So, but welcome tonight. We're, instead of sparring as we normally do, Bryan and I often will go at it, and people know that we step on each other and have to edit things out. But tonight we kind of wanted to reminisce a little bit. You guys got into a pretty cool conversation and started comparing notes about how things started, how you got into this journey, and how things have changed in that time. Courtney, I would love to hear a little bit about how you first got dialed into this transformation mode.
Yeah. So really the journey started for me in 2012 when I was working at Nordstrom, and we made a decision to go big with digital. And prior to that, we were really, IT was a cost center. Like a lot of these attributes will sound very familiar.
Mm-hmm.
It was gain as much efficiency as you can out of your technology organization. And then we made the pivot to, we're a value generator and we need to optimize for speed. And the starting point was really within our infrastructure organization. They started to say, we don't want to be, well, let me say what their target was to be self-service. Like, how do we automate infrastructure? Infrastructure as code, all of these concepts. They value stream mapped what it took to provision a database server. So they were kind of trailblazing.
I was going to say, they really were, if this was 2012, 2013, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was amazing. And then it turned into more of a, how do we do this in some of our developer teams? And so my role was leading our mobile development team. So it was our apps, and figuring out, how do we transition from releasing twice a year to releasing on demand? And it should be a decision. Like, we should be able to deploy 365 days a year. And we really should be able to do that it should be a business decision. Because before that, it was all about change management, We had these freeze windows that happened during holiday and our big events. And we were really, we were driving change around. We need to build confidence in our capabilities to deploy anytime.
It's funny reminiscing about those change freezes. There are organizations still now that have that, and I just have like a visceral reaction to it. Some of them I understand. You can make no changes in that environment for legal reasons, policy reasons. I do some work with the government. Bryan, you were working with another major retail chain, and you had those same kinds of freezes, right?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, you had change freeze around the holidays. It was the holiday event, and it stretched for months because the holidays start in middle of October and they end in the middle of January, and so you had to go through a lot of extra steps to get those change freezes in. But I had a go ahead.
Well, so Courtney started her journey around 2012, and there was that pivot, and I really want to understand if it was the same pivot for you, changing from the IT as a cost center to IT as a value generator. Is that the same thing that drove you as you got into this transformation change? Was yours the same timing?
Well, so we had different roles. I mean, Courtney, you were a VP, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, I was a senior engineer, so I was an individual contributor. But we had a SVP who was pretty visionary, and this was back in late 2014, okay. And we had, we were delivering. I was working in supply chain systems. We were delivering to distribution centers every quarter, like clockwork, 6 weeks late, because of merge conflict resolution and defects, and with scheduled war rooms and all the fun. And, the business needed us to move faster, and we were given this challenge, and the SVP was like, look, I need you guys to figure out how we can deliver every 2 weeks. And so we had to go and figure that out. And we started digging into continuous delivery. We actually literally read Continuous Delivery, the book, took it seriously. And we decided that every 2 weeks was unreasonable. We needed to go for daily, and be able to really we were focusing on why can't we deliver every single day.
But let me track that back for a second. What was the business imperative that the SVP had? Because he asked you, we need to do this, but was it because there was an impact to business? I mean, what was that motivator?
You're talking about a global organization that needs to respond to change in the market rapidly across the globe, while we're also acquiring other organizations and trying to get them integrated into our systems, that sort of thing. And we'd been working for a couple of years to get distribution centers able to handle omni-channel. When you have some DCs that are set up only to handle shipping to stores, and other DCs that can only handle shipping to people. And it's a huge waste of space, but if you can figure out a way to make it so your warehousing systems can handle both in one center, right? And so we've been focusing on that, and we'd been struggling with scaled agile framework, which wasn't making us any faster. In fact, it made us worse than we were doing project management. But this was all part of a suite of things to meet our business goals better. We were in the middle of migrating from project to product. Continuous delivery was the next step to meet those goals. And so it was, we spent, I met Courtney because I went to DevOps Enterprise Summit because we were challenged, how do we measure we're doing better? And I went there to figure out how to measure this stuff because we didn't know. It took us, the pilot teams we had for this to break up that giant monolith that we were delivering, start decomposing that into things that were more nimble so those teams could move faster. It was an 18-month journey.
Only 18 months to get from monolith to daily deliveries and love is like a cloud?
Well, and I'd say that on the first part of it was that we had this anti-pattern where all the senior engineers were on one team.
Oh,
Don't ever do
that sounds like typical enterprise architecture. You see that with TOGAF in the government space.
Yeah, they
Ugh.
took all of the tech leads in supply chain and stuck them on one team and said you're now going to be coordinating but all the teams lost all their tech leads, and then none of the teams were willing to try what we were telling them they should do. So we were doing this ivory tower hand down on continuous delivery. And so I went to my manager and said, look, we're never going to get anywhere. Like 6 months in, we're not getting any headway. And I was like, we're never going to get anywhere if you don't just let me have a team and let's try this out. And which they did, right? And I had to go and learn. I was like, I was talking to someone the other day about you just stay a chapter ahead. And that's all I was doing. I was just trying to stay a chapter ahead of everybody and pretend we were good at it. And you know, over the course of, it was less than a year once I got on that team, we as a team learned how to get this done. And we went from not delivering at all to delivering to a distribution center, getting feedback from people in the distribution center on Slack. We were delivering 10 to 12 times a day at one point. And getting rapid feedback. They'd come back with suggestions for the new product we were building, and we'd flip around responses to their suggestions in a day or two. So we were actually agile, and so we were seeing some really good outcomes from that. Now I will say that those outcomes were dependent on teams learning that it's not the pipeline that does that. It's a focus on quality and using the pipeline to verify quality that does that. And there was some leadership change later that impacted some of those outcomes.
No doubt. So I want to do kind of a compare, kind of apples to apples, or I don't know if you want to be apples or pineapples or whatever fruit you want to be, but in comparing the two of you, Courtney, you started in 2012. You're a VP and making these changes. You're driving that vision. Did you have a Finster? Did you have a group that you went to? I mean, how did you stay a chapter ahead? Or, tell a little bit about the start of this in your journey, kind of in parallel to what Bryan was saying. When did you finally say, I think we might be doing this thing?
Yeah. So I did. I had some, I call them trailblazers that were engineers who knew that there was a better way for us to be working. And they were driving different just mechanisms for how we would deliver value. I mean, I mentioned value streams because that was something that I had never heard of. They were doing it.
I learned it from you.
Well, yeah.
From that presentation, I learned it from you. Yeah.
I felt, I should say I felt, credible speaking to it in 2014 because I had been immersed in it for those few years. And what I learned was they were making amazing progress. But the true unlock came when senior leadership decided we need to be moving with more urgency. And so you had this, at one time we were tracking our lead time from request to in the customer's hands. And that became a metric that senior leaders were talking about and wanting to understand what was in the team's way.
Did they lead you, Courtney? So did the engineers, did you notice what they were doing, or did it start with, where did it start? Because I'm hearing you had some trailblazers. Yeah. And it blazed a trail and you hopped on that trail.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yes. So two things happened. One, they were doing a demo of some of the automation they had done for infrastructure as code, and they were provisioning in an automated way. And literally, I was walking by the conference room and one of the engineers popped up and pulled me in and said, you have to see this demo. So I watched the demo and I was like, this is wonderful. Oh my gosh, this is really going to impact. It's going to impact the delivery on the development side because they're not going to be waiting. Right. And they were just, the energy in the room was amazing. And then one of the engineers said, I really need you to, I need to introduce you to John Allspaw, who was the CTO at Etsy at the time.
Okay.
and you should read the Phoenix Project. So like literally within, that like day, I had witnessed the work that they had been doing. And they were like, the same engineer said, I want you to learn more about this DevOps movement and things that are happening out in the industry. So from that point forward, and then I got introduced to Gene Kim, and that's kind of how I got more immersed in the DevOps enterprise community. So yes, it was an engineer on the team who basically had the, I don't know if you'd say, it might be courage, but also just the
Passion.
Yeah.
Passion there. I mean, how many times
No,
think
so
about
this
that?
is wait, no, so there's something I want to. She touched on some things, and from the
Okay.
engineering perspective, okay, the reason for that passion, okay. So number one, when I went to DevOps Enterprise Summit in 2015 for the first time, I saw talks from several people that made me understand that the pain I'd lived in as a developer for 20 years was unnecessary. That's not how it could be. It could be a lot better. We were just focusing on, we've got this business goal. We want to figure out continuous delivery, right? Now I will say that my team was feeling higher and higher morale as we went on, because it was just, it was a better way to deliver. And then I became completely intolerant of any other way to deliver, because I discovered that it wasn't just my team that was feeling this, it was more. And, so that passion comes from, no, I'm not going to go back. I will not work for you unless we can do CD, because
Taste of freedom tainted you.
Yeah, the freedom tainted me. It wasn't even the freedom. It was the freedom
Lack
from
of pain.
there was the freedom from pain, right? And also that feedback loop that I missed at a company I worked for before. We were, we didn't have all the automation, but we were DevOps. I was the DBA, I was the business analyst, I was the developer doing customer customizations for a warehouse management system. When it was ready to deliver within 2 to 4 days, I would deliver, and I'd get feedback to find out what was breaking and go and fix it, because we weren't really like test automation. Right. This is like the 90s, but it's fun to deliver, and it's fun to get feedback, right? And when you're delivering every quarter, it's not fun anymore.
When you are getting that feedback rapidly, there's not that same perception that the defect people are after you. There used to be such a relationship, and I remember needing to navigate that between the dev teams, and then it goes over to testing teams. And it was the Hatfields and the McCoys. Obviously, the testing team didn't understand how things worked. Developers had a tendency to test the way that they were thinking about flow, not taking a step back and coming at it separately. And it was just an amazing fight. So it helped to, that wasn't feedback at that point, because it was so delayed. So you're giving me a laundry list of what, and I internalize it like, this is how bad you are. There's 7 things for you, or 17 or 27 things. One thing is a conversation.
Well, and there's something I want to touch on also, and how important it is to have a strong leader with a vision and who's going to trust the people doing the work. Because when we started going after the path of CD, we did have a dedicated testing organization that was outside the teams. And this core team, there's only like 3 of us on this core team who are focusing on, we need to solve this problem of continuous delivery. There's a friend of mine who's currently still in that organization, and I'd love to talk about when you got the higher level support beyond SVP, right? I really want to touch on that and the change that happens there. But he was working on, we need to build a platform for the area so that the teams can consume, so the teams don't all have to learn and have to build their own platform. And I was working on, how do we actually use the platform effectively? But we would go around to the different organizations that were roadblocks to our goal, which was daily delivery. We had a support organization who required a 30-day warranty period before they would take over support. And we explained to them the problem, and they didn't have an answer for the problem and weren't willing to engage, but that was fine because we knew for a fact that run what you brung was a lot better for quality than handing off to a support organization. So I was just shrugged and said, cool, now we can run what we brung again. And we also had the QA organization. And so I just worked with them and explained the problem. Said, this is what the SVP's goal is. This is what we need to do to get it done. This is the current process we have. We can't get there from here. Would you work with me and let's figure out how to get this done? And brought them into the conversation instead of trying to cut them out, which I think is super important.
I think both of you have an interesting perspective. My journey has been very different because aside from my early years, I was in with AccuWeather. I was in dev and my husband was in ops. Actually, I was engineering and he was ops. And I was with an epidemiology firm early in my career building epidemiology software. But since that time, I've always been with consultancies or with organizations that lean in, as opposed to, and both of you were in organizations where you owned your people, you owned the vision from the top down. One of the things that I often rallied against, it was so hard, was that each piece, each sliver, each slice would be parceled out to different groups for different reasons. Now, if you're in the same organization, at least you have the ability to say, nope, I am going to smoosh these together. I'm going to change this the way I want to.
Yeah.
But when there are contracts involved, when there's policy involved, that transformation is much more difficult. And it wasn't only with governmental organizations, it was sometimes with companies who had gone all in to outsource all of this to try and make it happen. So, hey, you're a testing organization. That's great. You're the testing organization. I was in one situation where requirements were gathered by one group, handed over to design and delivery. Well, the problem was that first half, the requirements, there was a little bit of Hatfield and McCoy's again. You ended up having to revalidate and re-verify. So there's essentially an entire second round of requirements gathering. Now, this was big requirements back in the day, but still, it actually wasn't that long ago. But DC was quite different than the journey that I hear you talking about. Do you think having that kind of internal leadership made a difference?
Well, having that internal leadership that was willing to say, no, the current structure doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It's key. I wrote a paper for IT Revolution the year before last where I talked about what you really need to have in place to improve an enterprise. And I hate enterprise transformation because you don't transform, you just continuously improve, or not. We should talk about the not later, Courtney. But what you need in place, right? And you need that. One of the things I said is that our goal is to go from idea to the end user and get feedback as rapidly as possible. And anything that stands in our way of that goal to improve our business goals is wrong. Where I work now, so I work with the Department of Defense, building platforms to make it easier for teams to deliver needed capabilities to people who put their lives on the line.
On the line.
Right? And so that's, before, when I was only delivering to people, what if I screwed up, they may not get their bonus or they may not make their rent. That was pretty important. But now they might die, or we might have something terrible happen to us from some adversary, right? It's more important. And so the idea of, well, this is the policy. Okay, does the policy add or subtract from the mission? What's the mission?
It's very interesting. I work with you, not in the same organization, but in the DoD, and have fallen in love with the mission. But I will tell you that I got chills the first time I was ever escorted onto a naval base. I had no clearances, anything else, but they wanted to hear what I had to say about DevOps. They were actually doing a refactoring. They had 55 applications. They wanted to build a digital platform. They understood those concepts. But the first time somebody stood up, and they're all in uniform but me, put their hands on the table and looked at me and said, so what you're saying is that you can get the capabilities into the hands of the warfighter. Whoa, warfighter. Is that a word? Is that real?
That is a word.
It is. It's a real thing. So you're right. But I would say that when we're dealing with many things, It's important when we deal with the medical industry, when we deal with FAA, right? We're talking about aviation. There are lots of ways for people to get hurt. All of them have an amazing imperative. And you're right. Whether we call it the business or the mission, anything that gets in our way of delivering value on behalf of the mission or on behalf of the business is something that you have to rally against. Now, Courtney, here you are starting with mobile apps, if I understand it. Did it go, what happened after that? Like you made that transformation, or bad word, transformation. Yeah. You started that change, right? Yeah. You started a fire burning. Talk a little bit about what happened along the way.
Yeah, so we had a lot of the similar situations that you've both described. Like we had silos, we had dev teams and QA teams and production support teams, and so we leveraged value streams mapping because there wasn't a great way to bring alignment into the conversation without, I like to talk about honoring reality. It's like, we needed to capture reality. And one of the best ways to capture reality and know where the impediments are is to do a value stream map, because everybody's eyes just like opened wide, and absolutely did the what is recommended. It's like leaders don't go into a room and map it out. The people who do the work are part of creating the map. And it just highlighted where we had all this opportunity. And, one of the first things that we did was we said, quality, we got a shift left. Quality is part of the developer accountability. We brought some of the quality engineers over into the development team. And we just said, we're one team. We're all trying to drive improvements to the product we're delivering. And like, that was kind of a first step in breaking down some of those silos. Mm-hmm. And then we just took the next one. Like, it's like, okay, great. Now we're getting faster feedback and we're improving quality. What's next? Oh, we haven't automated our deployment pipeline. Great. Let's do that. We don't have APIs. Great. Let's build APIs. I mean, it just became this, we got to the point where we were studying variation. So we would see how long things were taking. And we would learn that some of the outliers were due to dependencies, which we all know exist in every big company. And so we created, we didn't call it this at the time, but this is what I would call it today, like a technical program manager type role to basically manage the elimination and minimization of dependencies so that we could get work ready in a way that would make our flow as optimized as possible. And so all those efforts over time got us to that end state, which was we can deploy on demand. It is a business decision. We deployed on some of the biggest days of the year because we had high confidence in our capabilities.
And hang on, because that's super cool. All right. I've done retail for a long time, even before my previous organization. I've done retail most of my career, and deploying during the holidays. Holy crap, Courtney! No. That's awesome.
And it was very unpopular in the moment. We had to get because we had our freeze process and we had our change advisory board, and we had to get an exception. We actually created these tiers of capabilities. Mm-hmm. And so our team met the highest standard because we had all these automation capabilities, and we could do canary and we could roll back and we could detect, we had observability. So we were given an exception. So we could do change, but other teams couldn't, which also creates this momentum in the organization because you have these developers who are like, well, wait a minute, I want to do that. I want to be doing what those folks are doing. So then once we proved it out with the mobile team, we said, great, now we're going to do it in the web platform. Now we're going to take it to the website team, and we're going to start to basically, and I'm a big believer that it's not a one size fits all. Like the impediments in the mobile team were not the same as the impediments in the web team. Yeah. We learned from each other, but we learned new things. And so we started, same thing. We did a value stream map, and then we just started going after it. One of the things we had in the web flow was we had this thing called a hardening sprint. And it was, yeah, it was intended to be like code's ready, but we're going to like wait and make sure that it's ready for production deployment. What happened was development leaked into that because there was never enough time. And then we had quality issues, and we had some features we had to say no to. So we were like, the only way we're going to really solve this is if we force no more hardening sprint.
Yep.
Took it out. And that created opportunities for us to like plan better. We broke down features smaller. We started doing different types of, we did feature flags because we weren't doing those at the time. Like all these capabilities came out of those decisions.
Bryan, I want to ask a question or say something to what I heard you just say. You did it with the mobile team, and then you decided you were going to work with the web folks. I didn't hear you say, and thank you. You did not say, well, it's time to scale this. It's time to, right? Because that drives me crazy, because I had this interesting discussion today with some, what do you mean scale? Do you mean you want others to be able to adopt some of those principles and figure it out for themselves? Or are you saying that you need layers of hierarchy? Like, what is this thing that is scaling? And you didn't say that. So it sounds like you very, very much allowed each platform area or each line of business or what have you to kind of self-organize or learn these things. Was there crosstalk though between the mobile team? Was there like some sharing and lessons learned?
There was. So one of the things we learned was we had built what we called our mobile APIs. And what we learned was the web team had very similar use cases. So rather than them building out like a version of web APIs, we promoted the mobile to be a shared commerce API platform. What an amazing opportunity, because it really accelerated the web team, being able to consume those instead of building their own. So there was a lot of learning there. And then we took it to like platforms that really everybody was saying we could never leverage these tactics in like some of our mainframe applications and some of our, custom off the shelf. And it's like, no, these practices apply regardless of the platform and the application. Like all of this applies. And it was, I think the thing that was challenging, one of the things was focus, because everybody wanted to learn. They were like, can I please do a value stream map? I want to be on this, train. And there is a version of organizational capacity to really absorb all that learning. So we had to kind of make sure that we were thoughtful about, how we went about it so that we didn't have people feeling frustrated because they would learn new things but not really apply them. Now, this is pre-dojo. Like this is before the industry was talking about dojos and like ways to do this. So we were literally just like taking a team, doing their value stream map, problem solving against it, and then we kind of let them go and we checked in. So it's a little bit harder to like teach the whole organization to do that out of the gate. Right. So that was one of the things that I think was challenging, was trying to make sure people understood like we needed to focus.
But I think one of the key things is that it wasn't, oh, we can't do that. It's why can't we do that?
Yeah.
When we started, we had this book that said these things were possible. We had no idea how to do it. Right. And when we didn't know about value stream mapping when we started this, but what we did know was that continuous integration was a thing, and we knew what the rules for CI were. And I literally wrote the rules for CI down. I stuck them up in the area on the pilot team. I said, okay, why can't we do this? And we did the same thing you're talking about. It's like, okay, let's solve this problem. Let's solve this problem. Okay, what's the next problem that shows up? And you just go through and it's like, okay, what's the next problem that prevents us from doing this until we could, right? Yeah. I think that's super important, is you have that attitude of we can. It's just the only thing that's standing in our way is us.
Yes. Yeah.
So both of you were with it. I mean, you've changed careers or changed employers throughout this time frame. Like Courtney, you started out with Nordstrom's. At some point you left. Like when you left, you look back at that, you know, what was the state when you left? Like, what did it, were things going well at that point? You're like, okay, this is great. I see another problem set over here. Let's go this direction.
Yeah, I mean, we had done a lot of great work to create kind of the, I would say, the culture and the behaviors around embracing it. And my SVP had retired. So that was kind of one thing that I learned was, you know, the criticality of having his support and just learning what would sustain when he moved on. And then once I moved on, it was like, oh, what's going to sustain? Because when you don't, how do I want to say it? Like, leadership matters, which I don't think is a surprising thing to say. And what I started to learn about my own leadership behavior was, am I really teaching? Because if I'm not teaching, this will fall apart when I move on.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I move within the organization, it could fall apart. So like, how does this become more of a teaching point of view versus just being supportive? Like I was super supportive and I was there for teams and I would check in and I would unblock when they needed senior leadership support. But I think the missing is the teaching side of it, because that is what makes it sustain. And the other thing that is, and this is an industry passion of mine, I believe leaders need to evolve.
Yes.
And many senior leaders need to evolve. And sometimes you got to unlearn the things that that define success before. And so often I would meet these skeptical kind of comments like, well, you're micromanaging the team, because I would talk about Gemba and like going to the work. I said, I didn't say go and tell, I said, go and see. It's very different. And if you show up and you ask questions and you're there to support, it creates psychological safety, and the teams will raise their hand and they'll pull the hand on cord. Like all those things will come based on how the leader shows up. And I just believe that many organizations have a lot of churn at senior leadership levels, and it's just a reality. And when you have that shift in mindset come into the organization or exit the organization, both good and bad, it's an opportunity to either help the new leaders who come in understand the why behind what you're doing, and hopefully they embrace it and pick it up and keep it going and modify it in their own way. But I've also seen the situation where there's a senior leadership change and it's like, throw it all out. Like, I don't like none of that. Like, nope, that is not how we should be delivering technology. And there's just like this pendulum swing to unwinding a lot of what I think as an industry we would see as progress that is moving us in the right direction.
You know,
We need a metric for that, by the way. We need some kind of metric that says the command change, mean time to command change.
You're
What
triggering me a
happens?
lot. Hang on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm triggered a little bit, Courtney. But before I get to why I'm triggered, going on to the teaching thing, one of the things that I was doing down at, when it was just these pilots who were starting up, you know, I started learning things like, hey, you know, behavior-driven development, super effective way of breaking work down. You know, we had to learn that on our own because I like found it one day because we're trying to solve the problem of we can't push tested code because we're doing exploratory coding. And, but, you know, this was such a better way to work, but it was so localized to one small area of the organization. And so I put a whole deck together to teach behavior-driven development and how dramatic the improvements were. And then I would just go running around to other areas of the company, places I'd never been before, people I didn't know, and say, hey, I'd love to come talk to you about this, and just give presentations about it internal, just, you know, to teams. You should try this, right? And try to spread the cancer, the infection of what we were doing to make it so that you know, to do everything we could to embed it in so other people were doing it. But, you know, after that happened, we got a CTO in who wanted to improve engineering excellence across the entire organization and had listened to very smart people who said that we should use continuous delivery to do this. And so for several years, we built an opinionated platform that was focused on making CD the paved path and everything else not impossible, but slightly more painful. You know, I got to go up to the organizational level and say, okay, now how do we help other teams learn what we have learned? And, you know, Courtney, we had to do the same thing. Value stream mapping, I learned from you, was so critical of that. And you're right, because every single team, even within the same VP area, working on similar problem spaces, totally different things that you couldn't walk in and say, okay, let's cookie cutter this. You always had to go in and say, let's find out what the problems are and learn how to solve them together as a team, right? And we made a lot of progress. We didn't have a leader like you who's like, okay, how do I teach this? But we did have a leader who was engaged with the community, showing not just, you know, like vocal support, but like coming to community gatherings and speaking about how important these things were. When asked, putting some pressure on his direct reports if things are going backwards. He was, you know, we were tracking like what our delivery cadence was, and he was quarterly meetings. Hey, this is what our average delivery cadence is as an organization, and this is what has changed from the last time we had a meeting, right? And having that level of engagement was so important to make people feel this was important. It wasn't just something a few crazies were talking about, you know, that, hey, maybe we should talk to these few crazies and see how we can do it better. And that made a lot of impact. We made a lot of motion that way.
To tie that to something Courtney said, that environment, having somebody leading, right, by being everywhere, not in people's Wheaties, but being accessible, being vulnerable, showing numbers, good or bad, sounds like changes. That's psychological safety when it is, it's one of the best forms.
When you're talking about a CTO of a very large organization, that if I needed to go and talk to him, I just schedule a meeting.
That's what.
Or I could just walk up to him and just have a conversation in the hallway about how things were going, because he cared, he wanted to know, right? He, you know, and so that's sort of leadership versus direction. Very important.
The empathy that I'm hearing there, psychological safety, setting the tone. That's certainly different than establishing the strategy, right? Yeah. Setting the tone. And that is fantastic. Just awesome to hear. The kind of curious for both of you. Where are those changes that you made before? Like, where are you now? Where are they now? Are you still connected, Courtney, with the companies that you've worked through? Are they still doing really cool things? That's why you're drinking the heavy stuff. So maybe I asked Courtney, but maybe we should start with Bryan if he's driven to drink.
Courtney's much more eloquent than I am. I'm sort of a hammer. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I mean, in some cases, I am still connected to folks. I mean, everybody's moving around, so it's always hard to keep track. I think, you know, some things did go backward after I left Nordstrom. And I think that partially was, like I said, like my reflection as a leader was, did I do a good enough job with teaching these behaviors and helping with understanding how important it is to continue to work in this way? Now, Nordstrom is awesome. I mean, they've done amazing things. So I don't know exactly if like all of the, you know, the value stream mapping and all of those things are still there, but they innovate. I see it show up in the app. I see it on the website. So they do those things. So I can't imagine that a lot of the technical capabilities were I want to say like thrown away.
Dismantled or rolled back. Yeah.
Yeah. But some of the like, I think some of the behavior around like what
Mhm.
outcomes are we going to care about? Like we cared about essentially, this is before all the DevOps research and assessment work, but we did care about lead time and we did care about deployment frequency and the things that now we talk about as an industry. We were tracking employee net promoter score.
Mhm.
I don't think a lot of those things stuck. And so, you know, it's an interesting data point. But I do know when I was at Nike, we started an initiative based on a reaction to creating freeze windows called Ship 365. And what we wanted was to deploy 365 days a year. I mean, it's very similar to the story that I told with Nordstrom, but that is still in the DNA. I mean, Nike's doing amazing things too, but like making sure that the teams had the capabilities and the confidence to deploy any day, that definitely has been still part of the company. Yeah.
So you're learning with every part of your journey as well as being a teacher, right? And helping other people on their journey. And I know that you helped Bryan. So what I really want to know is, Courtney, where were you when whatever happened to Bryan happened?
There's only so much control that Courtney has over the world. I mean, she's an amazing person, but come on.
I know there are days when I do wish. I always like when Jean Kim always asks, like, if you could wave a magic wand.
Yeah.
It's like, wouldn't that be amazing? Like if we could all actually do that. But it is, I do think like, I think we would all agree, and you've probably seen a lot of companies that are faced with this as well. Like the work that we're doing and the passion we have for, you know, I use DevOps. I don't really like using it. I think it's the optimizing the flow of value to a customer. It's not a tech thing. Like I think that's one thing that the industry, like it got lost in some of the messaging where people just assume, oh, if I do CI/CD, then all these other, you know, like the value is going to get better. And it's like, no.
Automated testing.
Yeah.
No,
You know, I sent Courtney a thought that I've been working on earlier today, where I put a rant on LinkedIn earlier today talking about many things that many people have misconceptions of. And one of those is that DevOps is something technical and value stream management something new that's unrelated to DevOps. And I said value stream management and DevOps are the same exact thing, but they're the same exact thing coming at it from two different perspectives, where value stream management's coming at it from the perspective of product people, and DevOps is coming at it from the perspective of engineers trying to solve product problems. But it's the same exact thing. How do we improve the value of delivery? And the reason it's called DevOps is because of where it originated from, which is from the engineers trying to solve the same problem, right? But it's still trying to improve the flow of value. It's not a technical practice. There's technical practices involved because of what we're doing, because it's software development.
Right.
Yep.
But it's value stream improvement is what it is. So you want to hear what happened to me?
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to get there. What I need to know is, did you actually fill up that glass with more?
No, I didn't.
Hooch.
I'd have to walk upstairs to do that.
Okay.
And I have a little bit left.
Okay, so nurse that and then tell us the story.
Okay. So, you know, we made a lot of progress, you know, and I'll say that I still have a lot of inside information of what goes on in that organization, because I was asked to start a dojo at that organization. And so, and I was, I'm not shy. I used to be. When I met you, Courtney, I was very shy. All right. But I'm no longer
There's
shy.
been a time where you were shy?
Yes, very much. It took all of my courage to come and talk to Courtney when I met her.
Oh, good heavens, what the hell happened?
I don't know. It was not my fault.
I don't know, because I didn't know him before. I thought he came out like this. Sorry.
No. no.
Brash and smart and all over the
But
map.
one of the reasons that Jason hired me to, ask me to come and join his team to help lead this effort in platform was because he liked how I presented about the topic of continuous delivery. My job interview was amazing. It was 30 seconds long. I said, "Would you like to interview me?" Or somebody said, "No, I code reviewed you and I like how you present, so you're good." Okay, cool. Right.
God dang.
I'm in. Right. But because of the position I was in, where I was going all over the building, talking to all of the world, engaged with a lot of people. My team was, we had, when you've got 2,500 people in your Slack channel that you're communicating with all the time, you have some visibility. And so I still have a lot of connections. So all that to be said, that I know what goes on in that organization, because I still have friends there. That CTO who was really focusing on this,
Yeah.
he became an empty nester and decided that he wanted a job where he could move to where he wanted to move, and he went to a different organization and he left. And then there was a lot of us there that we were still on this mission, and so we just held on to all the gains we could hold on to while there was an interim CTO, and that interim CTO was one of the SVPs in the organization who was really laissez-faire about everything.
But she had been there. They had experienced it. They were at least adjacent to the energy, adjacent
Yeah, they
to
were
the mindset.
adjacent, but they didn't
Okay.
have to care, right?
Okay.
And his particular organization was not one that we were seeing great improvement in, because there was no incentives coming from him to do that. And not only that, but platform fell under him directly while we were working through, hey, we need to hire some more people, right? So we were just doing guerrilla warfare at that point. We went from being, we're in charge, to guerrilla warfare. And then we got a new CTO, and he was saying all the things, and we were doing, Courtney, to your point, we were doing the exact thing you were talking about. We were doing everything we could to say, this is what we're doing. This is what our goals are. This is why we're doing it. This is what we've done so far. And just please take this forward. Was getting very encouraged by some of the hires he was making in his leadership team, because there was a lot of really smart people coming in, until we got the head of the platform area, we did the same thing. He was saying the words, and we did the same thing. This is what we were doing. This is what we're trying to do, and try to get this done. This is what we've done so far, and the direction we're going, and he didn't care. Really, because what he wanted his kingdom, and he's like, well, first I'm going to build my kingdom, and then I'll figure out what I want to do with the area. And, the new CTO, he had his priorities, and his priorities, we were too, even though we've been doing it for several years, it's such a large organization that it takes longer than that to really embed the DNA.
Yeah.
And so it was embedded in pockets. And so what was happening is I'd have different areas coming and throwing up alarms and asking us to help fix problems that were coming from their leadership. I actually got personally in a little bit of hot water occasionally, because I'd go and just flame them. You're burning down all of our hard work. We put so much work into this, and you're burning it down, and I hate you. Right. But, over time, things would go wrong, right? Somebody would mess something up, and then there'd be a reaction from the top that would add a scar. And then something else would go wrong, a reaction from the top that would add another scar. And so instead of really focusing on why are these things happening, why are they happening here and not over here, and not digging, not going to the Gemba, just layering on scars. And the result that I've seen very recently is things have gotten so bad that you have the business going, what is wrong with you? Like, literally, what is wrong? I'm talking at the board level, right? What is wrong? What is going wrong? You've got the brakes being put on change. You have change process that's going back to when I got hired at that organization back in 2000, where you have in-person representation of change with a 3-day lead time on any change. You have to file your paperwork 3 days before you can even make the change if it's approved by the change board. In platform, we had been building this very opinionated, making continuous delivery easy platform. But you still had to know how to do CD to do it safely. The platform can't keep you completely safe.
Correct.
Right? We can inject security and compliance, but quality we can't do. And so really focusing on that, having that organization to teach you how to do it safely, which that organization is dying from apathy. There's like, after I left, there was nobody who was that super vocal person to try to push. And the person I reported to was also that same way, with a slightly different style. You've met Phyllis. And
I have met Phyllis.
but we both left. And so everything, all that push was dying. And there's a open source project I'm involved with called minimumcd.org. And there's a talk we've been giving. We talk about Dunning-Kruger delivery. And Dunning-Kruger delivery is when everybody gets a pipeline and they think they're doing CD, but they haven't learned how to do it. They haven't learned about testing. And this is what we wound up with, was we had a Ferrari. We'd given them, we given them a Formula One race car. And they thought, well, we've got the race car, we don't need to go to driver's ed. And so what happens is that problems start happening, and then more problems, and then serious, majorly impacting
with the product teams. These are problems that are happening with the quality of the products, not the quality of the platform.
They're not focusing on the things that Courtney talked about, right? Is solving the problems, how we can safely deliver and then do it quickly in small batches. It was just, okay, we'll just throw it in the pipeline, it's fine. And because there was no focus on how do we educate people beyond, hey, we're going to offer education for people so that they can learn a new programming language. No, how do we educate teams how to deliver safely? How do we educate people around the business goals we need instead of just pulling a certificate, right? Because that focus was lost, it became dangerous to deliver, and then that danger happened, and then it locked everything down. And it was just because of that lack of focus, because leadership had other priorities.
So they are navigating really stormy weather.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what that happens in.
I can tell you the immediate thing that I've seen and I expect to see more of is there's people who know what it should look like, what good looks like, very skilled engineers. What did I say earlier? If I can't do CD, I won't work for you. Guess what?
I was going to say that when we're talking about this, if I think about the economy right now, if I think about what's happening with tech, if I think about the world, why in the world would I want to backslide right now when there's so much that's not going well? I would want to keep plowing forward. Sounds like there's a fair amount of education that's needed. Obviously, I have no insight into it, but the story that you're telling me makes me heartsick that they're going to lose people. And it'll be interesting to watch it as an outside observer to see what happens, what really happens to the value that ultimately it's business, right? What happens with their business with this? I want to make sure I'm really cognizant of time because I will keep going forever. And you know this, Bryan, because I've kept you on for 2 or 3 hours before and we have to really chop it up then. And then we all look like this. And then the next sentence is like, right. So don't want to have to do that. But so I want to ask you both. I'll start with Bryan. I'll go to Courtney. What are some suggestions? Like, give a minute or two. What is that nugget that you would, not waving the wand, but what's that nugget that you would want people to really consider right now, knowing that all these volumes of things that you've experienced?
So if you're not the CTO, if you're like me, where you're, at the, middle engineering level.
I thought you were going to say peon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, peon, exactly. You need to learn. You need to bring in leadership. You need to work really hard to educate leadership. Early on, I ignored middle management because I was like, "Well, the CTO says to do it, so you're just going to do it. And I'm going to work with the teams and screw you." That was a terrible idea. So build that coalition of people and educate them. Don't just say, "Hey, we need to do this thing." Just explain to them the business reasons why this stuff is important. I explained to them, everyone in leadership, go and find out what they need and explain to them how improving this will give them what they need, and then explain what help you need from them to get it done. So you build that coalition and broaden the network as wide as possible, so that if a piece of the network falls out, you still have the remainder of the network to help with the replacement piece.
Community, 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 not location, 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 community, community, community.
Build coalitions.
Yes.
Courtney, how about you? What's your nugget for us?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very similar. So, I do believe that there is so much great work happening. There are bright spots in the industry. And what I've found to be helpful is when you find someone who is in the same role. So I'll use CFO as an example. Like often the financial processes need to be different for this to be successful. Find a CFO at a company that has gone through the change curve and understands what better looks like. Connect them to your CFO. As a tech person trying to tell a CFO why this is better, you'll make some progress, but they want to hear from a peer that they can relate to.
Interesting.
I call that expert as a service.
Yeah.
Find a friend to come in and talk to your people because you're not as smart as them because you work for your company and they don't.
And that's
oftentimes it's just the voice. There have been people who've told me, I've already told them that, and you're saying the same thing. For whatever reason, there's a different perception. Feed me the words. Help me to spread your message. So
tell me what you want me to say. I will say it. They'll listen to me.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I used to just say, I just want the outcome. If they hear it differently from someone outside the company, I'm okay.
Yeah,
I just want the outcome. I want people's lives to be better.
I used to use consultants like that all the time. I was like, I don't care if they get it from a consultant. I don't care. I just want the outcome. So I'll tell the consultant what I want them to say so the consultant looks smart, and then I get the outcome I want. That's all I care about.
You guys are wonderful. Hey, I want to make sure that Courtney's machine will reboot. I know she got a patch push to it. I know, Bryan, you've had a little bit of that heavy hooch that you've been sniffing and snorting there tonight.
Courtney, get a Mac so you can control those things.
Gosh,
it is a Mac.
It's a corporate Mac then.
Nice
it's
try.
Corporate. So, at any rate, so Courtney, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure to talk with you. It's been a while, and I'm so glad we've had a chance to reconnect. Bryan, you're a pain in the fanny, and I adore talking with you. And you always are great to spar with and bring your life stories. And I love that you argue, but you argue for a passionate, good reason, not to be a cantankerous poo, which some could accuse you of being. So thank you, everybody, for tonight.
Hang on. Before you leave, Courtney, again, it's, I know we talk a lot more than we used to, but it's always a pleasure. You have no idea how much you've helped me over the years, even when you didn't know you were helping me. And I really appreciate it, and you're an awesome leader.
Oh, thank you. And I feel the same. I've learned so much from you. So I'm so happy that we remain connected and that we got to reconnect. Right? Yay.
Yeah. After our one night stand, woohoo, rekindled the romance. So everybody who's watching this, I hope you've enjoyed the time that we spent with Courtney and Bryan. A little bit of a different tone tonight, but really insightful. And quite frankly, I'm ready to fill this back up. If there are questions that you have, if there are topics that you're passionate about, if there are people that you want to hear from, this is all about community, community, community. This is not about us. Hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on LinkedIn, do the Instagram, send us emails, text messages, put something in the bottom of this post, right down there. And do the whole
like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
And hey, if you have a story you want to tell, you have something you want to talk about, hit us up. We're always interested.
We always like to have more folks at the bar. That's all I got to say. So, and with that, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with our next On the Road to DevHops. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.